Good morning. I'd like to thank you for joining the Jenny and IBM Interconnect Comes to You webcast, where you'll learn about install and upgrade best practices for NetCool Operations Insight and how you can leverage Jenny to simplify and accelerate your install or upgrade. I'm joined by Gen E Director of Professional Services, Shawn Ryan, and Zane Gray, who covers NetCool best practices and development for IBM Systems middleware. We'll begin the webcast with a brief overview provided by Shawn Ryan of the challenges facing network and IT ops today based on first-hand experience implementing dozens of service management and assurance solutions. We'll then hear about the best practices around one of the top solutions to address these challenges from Zane Gray, and then Shawn will wrap up with a few ways clients can leverage Jenny to ensure successful implementation and service management post-implementation. Before we begin, just want to ask that you submit questions via the chat window, and questions will be fielded in the order that they are received. If for any reason you're experiencing difficulty accessing the web presentation, please send me an email at kate@gen-e.com so that we can send you a copy of the presentation. A recording of this webinar will be available within 48 hours following the webcast. At this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Shawn to kick off the webcast.
Greetings, everyone. Shawn Ryan here, Director of Professional Services with Jenny, and just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of what the motivation is behind moving to a solution like Network Operations Insight. We know today that the demand for the complex services that not only as consumers that provided by service providers, but within the enterprise for IT consumers, as the complexity has gone up quite a bit over the years. In addition to that, I think what's really changed, we've heard for a long time, we've known for a long time that IT really needs to better align with the business goals to support that business growth and deliver the reliable applications on time and at a low cost. That really hasn't changed. What's changed is the expectation for the end user. We as consumers, with our phones, we can download apps, we can add them, remove them. Just this on-demand nature of how we consume data and applications has really changed dramatically over the years. And it's really changed the way IT operations needs to be able to operate. They need to be more agile. They need to be able to deliver these services on a timely basis, and they need to wow the end users. And that's the experience that end users are expecting. We have, for the lines of business, they're managing complex portfolios of business applications and services to help their users innovate and drive value within the business. The developers are charged with creating and delivering these new applications and capabilities, and charged with really exciting the end user about these new capabilities. They need to do it quickly, and they need to do it with high quality. CXOs, as always, are still charged with keeping the costs down, making sure that IT is effectively serving the end users. They need to manage the budget for future demands, and we need to support the business opportunities internally. And then, of course, IT operations is tasked with providing the support and the adequate resources to maintain these business applications, and hopefully, working with delivery team and with development in a DevOps sort of strategy to deliver those services and capabilities in a timely manner. But it's a challenge. Next slide, please. We know that the responsibilities for operations management to manage that risk and ensure the availability of the critical services, and ensure the efficient utilization of not only the IT services and applications, but all the network resources. That's key to what operations does. And again, they face the same challenges in the level of complexity and the increased expectation of their end users. Any of us know, having gone through perhaps an upgrade internally of an email system or of a file sharing system, that when these upgrades happen, or when there are changes or new services being rolled out, there is downtime. We've all experienced that. We know that when delivering these complex services and new applications and new capabilities within an organization, that often they are not delivered on time. Things fall behind schedule. And really, the enterprise and the service providers, we spend a lot of money and budget on making sure that these applications and services are available and work properly and are wiring end users. And it's a major piece of what happens within any business today. Next slide, please. So how can Network Operations Insight help? It really provides that shift to be a more agile and efficient organization. It's based on Omnibus, #1 operations management solution in the market across enterprise and service providers. It combines the innovative IT operations analytics from IBM and being able to look at the data that's being collected within an organization and be predictive and provide insight in terms of, where can we expect outages, where can we expect new growth to be, and how do we take all this data and make it meaningful. And so the analytics is a key piece of this. We know that our end users consume our data and our applications from a variety of places. It's not just at your desktop or your laptop. It's across mobile devices, tablets, etc. So having support for those devices is key. And the infrastructure that we monitor, it's not the server group or the network group or the storage group. It really, all these things work in concert to provide these complex business services, and they all need to be monitored and aligned in terms of how they are viewed from an availability standpoint. Next slide.
Okay, thank you so much, Shawn. At this time, we'll pass the floor over to Zane Bray to run us through the install, upgrade, and best practices around NetCool Operations Insight.
Thanks, Catherine. So my name's Zane Bray. I work for the NetCool development organization within IBM, based here in London. And what I'm going to take you through today is a slide deck that I presented at Interconnect this year, and I want to show you how easy it is to transition from your incumbent NetCool installation over to the NetCool Operations Insight solution. And I'm going to show you some of the reasons why you might want to do that as well. So looking at this first slide, why upgrade? So I'm just going to go through some of the new features. First one here, real-time analytics for operational agility. What you can see in the screenshot is the new Java applet-free event viewer. So the traditional event list built into the web UI was Java applet-based. So we're moving away from using Java applet-based technology. So this is the fully functional Java applet-free event viewer. Coming along with the NetCool Operations Insight bundle is the log file analysis tool. That's an analytics engine which can be used to consume analytics log files and also event data. So that comes with the NetCool Operations Insight bundle. So from the event list, if you go back to the event list there quickly, you can see how you can right-click in context from the NetCool Omnibus Web GUI event viewer and do event searches within the log file analysis tool. This is all seamlessly integrated into one package. What this the log file analysis tool does is allows you to do historical analysis and keyword searches. So you can select one or more events and right-click those events and do keyword searches into your historic event data. On the screenshot, you can see here we've selected an event and done a keyword search on the selected event into log analysis, and it's come up here on the left with all of the keyword search results. You can very quickly identify events that have similar keyword events to the ones that you've selected or highlighted, and as we say, very quickly find the needle in the haystack, so to speak. So this is an operational efficiency tool, one of the primary value propositions in the Netcore Operations Insight offering. Next slide, please. What you can see here is another view in the log file analysis tool. What you have available with you additionally, in addition to keyword search tools, is a wide range of different types of charts and views. So you can really slice and dice your data. So as I mentioned before, this data is coming from Netcore Omnibus. So it's all event data. Additionally, you can import and ingest data from any other log file source as well. And all the data can be searched over, sliced, diced, analyzed, all within the same environment. On the left-hand side, you can see some dashboards there. So what we actually do is we ship pre-packaged dashboards with the product to get you started. But creating these dashboards and screens is very straightforward. Next slide, please. What you're looking at here is another part of the Netcore Operations Insight offering. So what are we getting with Netcore Operations Insight? We're getting a whole bunch of analytics capabilities. That's what you're getting, a whole bunch of analytics and enhanced capabilities. This next one that you're looking at the moment is the seasonality functionality. For those of you that are not familiar with seasonality, what seasonality does is it processes and analyzes your historical event archive, and it looks for events that have a seasonal element to them. And what that means is, say for example, you have an event that happens at the same minute of the hour, or the same hour of the day, or the same day of the week, or the same day of the month, for example. The Seasonality Analytics will pick up on that. And where that's useful is it helps to identify chronic problems that you have in your environment. So an example of that might be there may be a backup job that runs every Monday morning at 4 a.m. This particular backup job runs out of disk space, and that creates a critical event which cuts a ticket. By the time the operator goes to look at the disk space problem, the problem may have resolved itself, so the ticket gets closed. Next Monday morning at 4 a.m. the same thing happens, but it may be a different operator on duty, so a different person looks at the problem. And these sorts of problems can often occur in your environment and may not be picked up on the fact that this is happening week in and week out. What Seasonality Analysis will do is it will highlight to you the fact that this is happening at a certain time of day or at a certain day of the week. And the nature of an event's seasonality can often be a clue as to what is causing this problem. There's a couple of anecdotes there. One large North American bank who applied the seasonality analysis to their environment was able to reduce their overall event volume by 12%, simply by using the seasonality analysis to identify the chronic problems that they had in their environment that they weren't aware of. Next slide, please.
Zane, I've got a quick question from the audience.
Sure.
Someone would like to know, where does NOI get the historical data from?
Okay, that's a good question. So the log file analysis tool, that takes a live feed directly from Omnibus. It stores that event data in a proprietary, highly indexed internal data store of its own creation. In addition to that, it's ingesting other data and other log files from other sources as well. So that's the log analysis tool. The other analytics components within NOI are actually reading their data from the traditional Netcore event historical archive. So that would be the reporter database. So that's the traditional event archive that everyone will be familiar with.
All right, thank you, Zane. Continue.
Okay, next slide, please. So why upgrade to NetCool Operations Insight? So one of the things Shawn touched on before was the new dashboards available. So NetCool Operations Insight, with it you get the new dashboard UI. So rather than the old tip-based system, it uses the new IBM Dash UI, and with it it comes this new widget-based approach to building dashboards. You really can get some far more sophisticated dashboards with this new environment. It's widget-based, so you have a palette and you can drag and drop widgets and link them together, and you can draw data from any source that Impact can get its hooks into. So Impact integrates into the Dash as one of the data providers, and where you can't get the information directly from Omnibus, you can utilize Impact to pull that data from anywhere. The array of widgets that you have available to you is very, very good. So there's table widgets, chart widgets. What you can see in the middle of the slide there is you can see a map of the United States. That's actually, these slides are actually taken from the Interconnect demo. That particular widget is a map widget, so it's got a Google map there, I believe, and you just feed it where you want the map to center on, and your data points and severity indicator, and then the widget just auto-populates that stuff. Next to it there's a hierarchy tree widget. Similarly, that will have its input parameters, which you can just feed, and it will just render for you. Line charts, bar charts, status indicators, table widgets. You can see a whole bunch of different types of widgets on those screens there. On the right-hand side, of course, you can see a smartphone that is showing you the new look event viewer for smartphones. So we actually have a mobile phone optimized event viewer. So very, very simplified, just to allow somebody that's on the go to keep an eye on the events that they're interested in and do simple tasks such as acknowledge events. Another point to make, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see an iPad there, a tablet device. A point to note here is that the dashboards will render the same on a tablet device as they will do on a PC or a computer. They're all HTML based. That little snippet at the bottom there, 60% faster in creation of custom high-impact dashboards. So this has come from some user stories where we've been out and we've done some work with customers, and this 60% faster creation was based on user feedback. So it really is much easier to use and much quicker to produce dashboards that just look a lot more impressive than ever before. Next slide, please. So this slide is just talking about how IBM has developed its testing and shipping process. Upgrade process is extensively field tested. So during the beta phase, when this software is in beta, we identify a number of large key customers that have also indicated that they want to get involved in the beta program. And what we do is we actually have our test team go out on site and upgrade all of their environment to whichever target environment, in this case NOI. And if there are any issues or problems encountered along the way, those issues get logged with our development team. But the point of this process is, first of all, to give that large customer the peace of mind that the upgrade will work, and secondly, we're actually testing the upgrade in real customer environments rather than just doing it in the lab. The idea is that by the time that the product GAs, it's been tested very thoroughly in these real customer environments, and we know that it will work. that means that customers, of course, can upgrade with confidence when it comes time to do the upgrade, and they know it will work. Next slide, please. So the next thing to say is that the upgrade process is thoroughly documented. We actually publish an installation and upgrade guide. The latest version of NOI is 1.3, and the latest NOI installation upgrade guide is for that version, and it's available on the Netcool Best Practices website. So the URL is there, ibm.biz/NCO_BPs. This document provides you a step-by-step instructions for upgrading your incumbent Netcool components to the NOI versions. So in a nutshell, it's installing or upgrading the core Netcool components, Omnibus, Impact, and WebGUI to the latest versions, then installing the log file analysis tool, and then applying the NOI extension packs over the top. So very, very straightforward step-by-step instructions provided in the best practices guide here. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned just now, this is sort of a high-level overview of the steps required to get to Netcool Operations Insight 1.3. So as you can see here, if you have a previous version of NOI, for example 1.2, it's simply a case of applying fix packs to the 3 components there that are listed, updating the extensions for Impact and WebGUI, and then upgrading the log file analysis tool. So if you're, I'll also mention at this point that the best practices install upgrade guide will give you the steps for installing from scratch, as well as upgrading from an incumbent version, whether that be NOI or just a regular Netcool installation. Next slide, please. So why upgrade to version 1.3? So what's new? What's new in 1.3 that would compel you to upgrade? So if you don't have NOI at all, then you'll benefit by going to NOI by acquiring all of the analytics tools that we've spoken about so far. So the log file analysis tool and the seasonality tool. What we're working to do is to add more and more of these analytics tools and more tools generally to make the NOI offering increasingly valuable and useful. We've had clients already that have realized significant gains by the insights that the analytics have provided to them. What's new in 1.3? Well, we have introduced event grouping. So in the event viewer, which is the new look event list, which I mentioned at the beginning, you can see a screenshot of it at the bottom of the slide here. One of the new features is we can define relationships between events and render that within the UI using these twisties, as you can see here. That top level event has got an event underneath that, and then that one's got 4 further events underneath that. So this allows us, by defining these relationships, to group events together. And what NOI 1.3 does is it introduces 2 tools which will allow you to, well, it will basically help you to do this. It will help you to sort, organize, and group your events based on incident. So we do this in 2 ways. The first one is we use analytics, and what it does is it again looks at your historic event archive, and it looks for groups of events that have occurred together in the event history. Events that always happen together at the same time, there's a good chance that those events are related to the same problem. The other angle that we take is using scope-based event grouping. So on that same premise that a bunch of events happening in the same place at the same time are likely to be related, we also provide a framework whereby you can define your own scope, your own sort of definition of what scope might mean, and it will also do the grouping. So in this way, we're actually sorting, grouping events based on relationships we know about, i.e. the scope-based event grouping, and ones that we don't know about, and this is where the analytics comes in. Interestingly enough, the analytics-based event grouping has found all sorts of interesting relationships in customer event data that they weren't even aware of. A large European bank based here in London ran the analytics over their event data and discovered a relationship that they had no idea was present. So how it went is a team that provides a system for other businesses to make use of. Every Monday morning at 10 o'clock they would test the failover failback capability. And this would generate a bunch of alarms with that. So the system reported to the team that the failover was successful and the system was continuing to provide a service. And indeed the failback was always successful. So they went and did this every Monday morning at 10 o'clock. What they didn't realize was that the system the failover wasn't actually working correctly, and the service was not actually being provided to those dependent processes. In another building, an applications team who, via one way or another, were dependent on that service, inexplicably had an outage every Monday morning at 10 o'clock, and they had no idea why. It would last for 10 minutes, and they basically just lived with it. When we went in there and ran the analytics grouping over their event history, it actually picked up this relationship. And at first glance, they didn't think the relationship was valid, but on further investigation, they actually discovered the truth behind it. So not only is it providing a real-time grouping and organizing of your event data for the benefit of operations, it's actually also revealing all sorts of relationships within your event data that you may not even be aware of. Next slide, please.
Dean, I've got one more quick question from the audience. As more analytics are developed into NOI, will there be an additional cost associated, or will they come as a part of their NOI entitlement renewal?
So good question. I'm an engineer working in the development lab. I don't know a whole lot about pricing and entitlement, but as I understand it, if you upgrade to NOI, the licensing is much simpler. It's simply based on number of managed endpoints rather than having to count up all your object servers and whatnot. So it's much more simplified. And as far as I understand, to answer the question, as long as you are in maintenance, I believe you automatically get entitlement to any of these new analytics tools as they come out. So I know that people who bought NOI 1.2, migrating to NOI 1.3 was a free upgrade for them. So I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Zane.
Next slide, please. Any more questions, by the way?
It looks like that is it for now.
Okay. So, scope-based grouping case study. So, what I wanted to do here was just to give you an example of where the scope-based grouping has been applied successfully using a customer environment with customer data. So, we applied the scope-based grouping to Nokia NetApp data. So telco equipment tends to be very hierarchical and very structured. And what we found was we're able to leverage the scope, that being the base station controller ID, in the event stream as being our definition of scope. So what we said was if we get a bunch of alarms coming from the same base station controller ID, which conveniently is encoded into the data stream, then we can use that as the basis of our scope. Incidentally, if the scope information is not available in the event stream, you can additionally enrich that into your events via enrichment in the traditional ways, either in the probe or via impact, for example. So getting back to the story, we applied the scope-based grouping to a multi-day dump of Nokia NetAct data, and we looked at how the data would look in a traditional event list. After deduplication, we ended up with 8,700 events, which is a large number of events for our operators to deal with. Interestingly enough, more than half of them were critical, and quite often operators are told to focus on the critical events. Well, that's obviously not very helpful when there's far more events than they can possibly deal with. The third bullet point here, some of the incidents that we found in the event data had more than 50 events in them, and some of them had more than 100 events in them. And the difficulty was those events trickled in after something major broke, sometimes over a 48-hour period in some cases. So imagine something major breaks, you get a flurry of events, but then you continue to get more events and more events and more events over many, many hours. The likelihood of multiple trouble tickets being opened is very, very high. And that's where our customers identify as their primary cost. So events coming in don't cost very much, but when someone has to get in a truck and drive to a site, or even an operator has to open a ticket, look at the ticket, deal with the ticket, perform some investigation, this is where the cost comes in. So the need to be able to handle these large volumes of data is clear. With the event grouping in place, with the scope-based event grouping, grouping based on the scope ID of the base station controller ID, those 8,700 events collapse down to 1,100 separate incidents. So instead of having 8,700 rows in your event list, I end up with 1,100 instead. That's initially a very big reduction in rows that I'm presenting to my operators. The next thing to note here is that even more powerful than the fact that the rows were reduced, the events were all grouped nicely by incident. So it says that even if the events are spread out over time, so some of these groupings, we had the events, as I mentioned, coming in over a 48-hour period. So that's tricky normally to deal with, but if they're neatly bundled together, then I can actually see them in one place and more easily diagnose the problem. You can potentially have one trouble ticket per incident instead of potentially multiple. One customer said to us that when there's a major outage, they can potentially get 50 tickets or more being opened as a result of the hundreds of events that flood in. So the potential savings here are very clear. Next slide, please. So just a few more items here about why upgrade to version 1.3. When I presented this at Interconnect, version 1.3 was just about to be released. 1.2 was the version that was current at the time. From 1.2 to 1.3, we've had a number of enhancements to the log file analysis. We've had some addition of networks for operations insights. So this is the addition of the IBM Netcool Network Manager application that's been integrated into the NOI offering, and a whole bunch of user experience enhancements to the event viewer. So this has basically brought the new Java applet-free event list into fuller parity with the traditional event list. This is good news for our customers, as I mentioned before, because it means but they don't longer have to have Java installed onto their workstations with all of the overhead that that entails. Next slide, please. So other resources. As I mentioned before, the Netcool Best Practices site is at ibm.biz/NCO_BPs. And if you're interested in looking at the new features in Netcool Operations Insight, and you want to sort of read them in plain English, then there's a blog there at the bottom of the page there, ibm.biz/EG_blog, EG standing for event grouping. So that will talk you through some of these new features that I've mentioned today, including seasonality and both the scope-based and analytics-based event grouping, and provide you with some simple examples and some sort of background descriptions about how they work and what we're trying to do. I believe that's the last slide. Do you want to just move to the next one?
Thank you so much, Zane. At this time, I'll pass the floor over to Shawn Ryan, our Director of Professional Services.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Zane, for that informative overview of the NOI functionality. Just wanted to take a brief moment here and talk a little bit about Jenny and the services we provide and the offerings we provide to help enable some of the functionality that Zane covered with the NOI. And really what it boils down to is from a professional services standpoint, Jenny's been doing this for a long time. We highest number of AAA accreditations and Tivoli certifications in our space. We've been a premier business partner with IBM since they acquired Markham-Hughes back in 2006. And so we have many years of deploying these solutions, and we have several NOI deployments under our belts at this point for both regional companies and large Fortune 500 companies across North America and EMEA. The way in which we deliver these products and the service offerings we provide a lot of flexibility in how we can assist your organization in rolling out some of this functionality. As Zane had mentioned earlier, the upgrade process is well documented and fairly straightforward, but we understand that there are limitations within your organization based on headcount, people changing to different roles within the organization or leaving the organization, and other projects that are in flight, and so we could supplement your organization from a services standpoint to help you roll this functionality out and realize that the value that's provided in the NOI solution. Short-term projects, long-term projects, staff augmentation, we can be either on-site or remote, and we can partner with other business partners that you work with. So a lot of flexibility in the services we provide to help you realize the value with the NOI solution. Next slide, please. In addition to our professional services, for delivery, we also offer training and roadmap services from an enablement standpoint. We offer product overviews, so as new features come out with for example, the version 1.3 of the NOI release, there's new features and functions, and we can provide that information in quarterly product overviews, or as these products are released, we can work with you to make sure that the organization understands the value being provided in the latest releases. If it's a new piece of functionality that you're looking for, we can provide demos, proof of concepts, and then once it's all stood up, or even for within your existing infrastructure, we can provide knowledge transfer that's customized to your environment to make sure that everyone within your organization understands how to support and administer the solution moving forward. Next slide, please. In addition to the professional services that we provide, and Jenny offers the full life cycle support of these solutions. So from the evaluation stage of perhaps answering an RFP or RFQ that you've submitted for to vendors for various solutions, all the way through the delivery phase, and then post-delivery we offer level 1, level 2 standard support, as well as a premier support offering that can be viewed as a remote administrator, somebody that's either a part-time or dedicated resource that is complementing or providing full support from an administration standpoint for the applications and for the solutions within the Tivoli suite, including NOI and other pieces as well. So again, standard support provides sort of that break-fix level 1, level 2. Premier support provides that remote administration capability to supplement your organization, and then professional services can provide rollouts of new functionalities, upgrades, and really sort of any solution offerings you need from a planning, rollout, and delivery standpoint. Next slide, please. Just a couple more notes on the Premier support. Again, going back to some of the challenges in delivering this, again, from an upgrade standpoint or from a system administration standpoint, it is fairly straightforward, but we understand that there are time constraints within your given resources within the organization. Either somebody has left the company and so you lose some of that technical expertise, or if someone moves to a new role, competing priorities, a number of reasons for why it can be challenging to manage the administration of your Tivoli environment. So Premier Support, again, provides that remote administration capability. It's a single point of communication. It's very cost-effective compared to, say, professional services offering, and it really eliminates that need to hire additional resources. And especially if you look at a staffing model where perhaps you're only half a full-time employee short of where you need to be in terms of being able to meet the other priorities within the organization, Premier Support does have part-time resources available as well. And these are dedicated, certified Tivoli engineers. Next slide, please. And the last thing I wanted to do is just to sort of wrap up this presentation and kind of touch on a couple of points that Zane had brought up regarding some of the nuances relating to upgrading to NOI. From a value proposition, the new dashboards and based on HTML5, reducing the need to have that JRE component on the desktop is very useful. The analytics that are brought to bear for analytics-based alert grouping and scope-based grouping that Zane had discussed, these are all important technical value propositions, but there's other sort of reading between the lines things that you have to look at in terms of the overall value. And a big piece of that is the simplified licensing. As you go from year to year, or every several years, sort of maintenance renewals, the exercise of going through the resource value units, and can I roll up? Do I have the budget to roll out a new development environment? A lot of this is simplified away in the new licensing model associated with NOI. As Zane had mentioned, the licensing is purely by device count. We're not looking at the EMS licenses or the resource value units or how many object servers you have deployed. You can really, once you've moved to the NOI licensing model, it's you're licensed by the number of devices. If you want to stand up a backup object server, if you want to stand up a 3-tiered object server environment, a development environment, test environment, you're entitled to that, provided that you have the device counts for those environments included in your entitlement. The log analysis does have a limitation in terms of the amount of data that you can consume, and there is pricing based beyond that for how to consume additional data beyond the 1 gig, and so that's something that you need to look at in terms of the cost of ownership. And then finally, from a product roadmap, we know that this is the direction that IBM is taking in terms of how these solutions are bundled together. And if you're running standalone versions of Omnibus or Network Manager today, really NOI is the way forward to maintain that entitlement. As new products are released, it's likely that those new versions of products are released. Those new versions will be released within the NOI bundle. Any questions at all about some of the nuances of upgrading to NOI?
I don't see any at this time, Shawn.
Okay. Well, that's all I had, so thanks everyone for joining. And Kate, I'll back to you.
Thank you, Shawn. I appreciate you running through that with us. If you have any questions about anything that you've heard today, please feel free to send me an email at Kate, K-A-T-E, @gen-e.com, or contact your account executive. Before we wrap up today's webcast, I'd like to announce that we'll be hosting another Interconnect Comes to You webcast on July 16th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on the topic of typically network manager best practices, and I'll send out those registration details after this call. This concludes today's webcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.